the entirety of music history, I can't think of another band that has received so much hate from their own fans.
Alright, we're Bring the Horizon.
And for the next few weeks, we're going to be posting videos on this website,
answering your stupid questions.
So how did we go from this to decades later, this? On October the 30th, 2006, Bring Me the Horizon released their first studio album, Count Your Blessings, via Visible Noise Records, and it somehow managed to debut on the UK album chart at number 93. And here's why I say somehow. In 2006, the UK album charts weren't exactly loaded with heavy music. Some of the biggest selling artists of that year included artists that most Bring Me the Horizon fans have probably never listened to or even ever heard of for the most part. Razorlight, Keane, James Blunt, and the Pussycat Dolls. Music that couldn't be further from Count Your Blessings if it tried. Yet, as we all know, over time, Bring Me the Horizon drastically changed and developed their sound so much that it is almost unrecognizable from their early beginnings, and some would say much closer to being pop music than ever before. So is this why fans are angry again? Tragic. Literally, this is the worst Bring Me the Horizon album I've ever heard. Almost all of the new songs are either mid or bad. The songs don't complement each other. You could have done way better. This is not Bring Me the Horizon. There are endless comments like this scattered across social media platforms that Bring Me the Horizon use, and of course, other fans defending them. What's surprising though is how so many people are still disappointed that a band known for changing their sound constantly has once again changed their sound. And you can guarantee that if they just released the same album over and over again, some fans would just complain that the new album sounds exactly like the last album, so you just can't win. But how has it come to be that a group has become such a diverse band in the first place to give fans a reason to hate them almost every album? Well, we're going to take a look at the evolving history of Bring Me the Horizon. Deathcore. Deathcore is an extreme metal subgenre that combines death metal with metalcore. The genre consists of death metal guitar riffs, blast beats, and metalcore breakdowns. So Bring Me the Horizon formed in 2004 in the city of Sheffield in the United Kingdom, and they took their name from the now hugely successful Disney franchise, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Bring me that horizon.
They started out as a deathcore group, with deathcore traditionally being known as extremely aggressive music. That aggression can come from many places. For Oliver Scott Sykes, it seemed to come from nothing more than being a bit of a rebellious kid. And like most rebellious kids, this outlet can often turn into artistic creativity. We're just some kids from Sheffield. We didn't even have a dream, we just made a band. We didn't know where it would go. I was kind of a hyperactive child. I had ADHD. I went to classes for it with other ADHD kids, but I didn't really ever take the medication, so I was a bit of a nutter. I got in trouble for going down the street writing swear words all over people's cars and shit like that. I don't know what was running through my head. I guess I was just a bit of a tearaway. I've always been into art since I was little. That's all I used to do when I was at school and in my spare time, just sit and draw. When Ollie was 13, he started to delve into the world of heavy metal, and like most teenagers, this provided him with some sort of physical and mental outlet. 1 year later, he would start going to live shows. He started to become obsessed with singers and being on stage.
Favourite band when I was young was Linkin Park.
The first time Ollie sang on stage was at a show in the UK. He he went to see one of his favourite bands at the time, Funeral for a Friend, a Welsh post-hardcore group that became hugely popular with their debut record, Casually Dressed and Deep in Conversation. At the show, the singer was ill and passed out towards the end of their set. 10 minutes later, they announced they couldn't finish the show. Ollie, though, says he threw his hands in the air and screamed, "I'll sing." So the band finished the set with Ollie as the singer. And this might sound like a fairy tale or that it's been made up, but in the UK, especially within this scene at that time, this really is something that would have happened, believe it or not. Funeral for a Friend were not deathcore or anything even close to deathcore. In fact, some of Ollie's favourite artists when he was a teenager are a far cry from anything that even remotely resembles heavy metal. It's one of my favourite albums, and it's not even something we'd make anyway. But if we could write it, it'd be amazing. It's very soft, kind of post-rock, indie American stuff. It was my favourite album when I was 14. In fact, it still is. Ollie said this in an interview with Metal Hammer magazine back in 2020. The album he was referring to is Kill Them With Kindness by The Jealous Sound, and it sounds a little something like this. So you can see that melodic music has always been a big influence on Ollie's vocal style. He was also listening to a lot of post-hardcore music that reflected his earlier deathcore style vocals with bands like Hope's Fall and their 2002 record, The Satellite Years. And just to quickly interject, no, I'm not saying Hope's Fall were a deathcore band. It would be Ollie and drummer Matt Nichols who would initially come together to form a band, and they also shared each other's rebellious streak. That's what everyone used to say about me. I was disruptive. I hate people telling me what to do. I hate school. I hated my teachers, and I kind of let them know about that. I got suspended. I can't even remember how many times. It was ridiculous. I guess I was one of those kids that everyone hated because I was a bad kid. My mum and dad got divorced when I was 14 years old. They sold the house and the money they got. My dad said, "Right, you can have whatever you want. What do you want?" And I said, "I want a drum kit." The first complete Bring Me the Horizon lineup would consist of Ollie Sykes on vocals, Matt Nichols on drums, Curtis Ward on rhythm guitar, Matt Keane on bass, and Lee Malia on lead guitar. Lee Malia would be a key ingredient early on, as he was responsible for writing most of the riffs and songs. And this was before they started to rely heavily on programming. Early on, they simply wanted to be in a band. There was no future thought about the development of their sound. Lee Malia and Curtis Ward were in a covers band called Fifth Column, and they mostly played Metallica covers. So metal was a huge influence for them early on.
I were in a Metallica cover band at first with Lee. That's what band we were in before this band.
On the first album, I think I was getting away with murder, really. I was really frantic and trying to be as metal as possible, doing things I couldn't really do. I was pulling it off, but I was scraping by. We would go on tour and watch a lot of drummers, and I would think, why can't I do that? On the first CD, we were influenced a lot by Swedish metal, At the Gates and stuff like that. There's a lot of just fast playing, whereas now our sound has matured a bit and we are influenced by more things. On the first CD, we were 18 or 19 years old and wanted to be as metal as possible. Now we're into a lot more different stuff, a lot more influences. At the Gates are a Swedish death metal group from Göteborg, or Gothenburg if you want the English pronunciation, Formed in 1990, they are seen by many as pioneers of a certain style of melodic death metal. By the time Bring Me the Horizon had even formed in 2004, At the Gates had already released 4 studio albums between 1992 and 1995. And for a bunch of 17 to 18-year-old kids to enter a studio and essentially try and replicate this style of music is quite ambitious, to say the least, but that's exactly what Bring Me the Horizon tried to do, and this was the result. This is what The Edge of Your Seat was made for, is the first EP released by Bring Me the Horizon in 2004. And honestly, for a bunch of kids, all largely self-taught on their instruments, is pretty impressive. And this was followed by their first studio album in 2006, Count Your Blessings. And it's kind of crazy to even think about the fact that this album landed the band a top 100 chart position in the UK charts. The record itself is classed as deathcore, and this wasn't a genre that was big by any standards in the UK at the time. In the same week, you had artists such as Robbie Williams, Girls Aloud, and Amy Winehouse taking the top 3 spots, and then My Chemical Romance at number 5 with The Black Parade. Probably the heaviest record in the charts for the UK that week was The Crusade by Trivium, apart from Count Your Blessings. Count Your Blessings spent just 1 week here before dropping off the charts completely, and as if by some miracle, this record also managed to see a release into the American market by Earache Records on the 14th of August 2007. But how did they possibly come to achieve this despite never even setting foot on American soil before? Well, that would be thanks to the glory days of MySpace. According to a press release by the band in May of 2007, they said this. In 2006, Bring Me the Horizon was the recipient of a Kerrang Award for Best British Newcomer and held steady on MySpace's top 100 list of the most played bands, currently boasting a play count of 4.2 million plays. Bring Me the Horizon was only one of 2 UK acts to chart in the MySpace Top 100, the other being Coldplay. In addition, they've toured with bands such as Bleeding Through and Killswitch Engage, and performed a show-stealing set at the UK's Download Festival.
Oh, the frontman of the biggest band on MySpace. I've not been on MySpace for a while. How is Tom?
Tom is doing alright, man.
Thanks to this social media platform, Bring Me the Horizon were already becoming a global name, and their next 2 records would see them become one of the fastest growing artists on a social media platform of the generation. Suicide Season released in September of 2008, and There Is a Hell, Believe Me I've Seen It, released in 2010, would see Bring Me the Horizon enter a new phase in their own musical development. First record was produced by Dan Sprigg, who had previously worked with Napalm Death, Cradle of Filth, and Cathedral. Fredrik Nordstrom would be the producer behind Suicide Season and There Is a Hell. Nordstrom, you could say, had somewhat of a more diverse production background, having worked with Arch Enemy, In Flames, Opeth, and Soilwork. bands that incorporated more melody and complexity into their music. Again, looking back at Ollie's early influences, he was clearly taken by melodic metal. The first metal record I bought, so it depends what you define as metal. The first couple of records were Linkin Park and stuff like that. The first album that I was like, wow, this is metal, was Killswitch Engage. I guess it's Alive or Just Breathing from 2002. I remember putting that record on for the first time. I was like, oh my god, this is too heavy. I think that's really what got me into my taste for heavy music, but after that, I was listening to all kinds of different death metal, like Decapitated and Suffocation, just harder stuff like 𝐕, which I'm thankful for. This really should be our first clue as to exactly why Bring Me the Horizon started to develop their sound in the first place. We have to remember that when they recorded Count Your Blessings, they were very young and most likely very impressionable from a musical standpoint. Combine that with your general teenage angst, and of course, you're probably going to end up with an aggressive band. Nordstrom had also worked with At the Gates, so put all of these things together, and not only did it make sense for the boys to work with him, it's only a natural progression that their sound was going to drastically develop over the course of these new albums, and this was the result. And with this came enormous success for a band of this nature. They landed chart positions not just in the UK, but also America and Australia. There is a Hal even charted in Japan. So whilst they were obviously still continuing to grow their audience, the hate grew along with it. I guess we're a band that creates a lot of positive and negative comments. We're just one of those bands that goes straight down the middle. People either love us or hate us. I guess it doesn't really faze us. That's just the way we've dealt with it. It's hard to care about someone slagging your band off when you're having the best time of your life. And I think Ollie has a point. When your third studio album hits number 17 on the US Billboard chart, number 2 on the US Independent Albums chart, number 13 in the UK, and number 1 on the UK rock and metal and independent charts, why would you care how many fans turn on you after you develop your sound to such incredible success? Especially when you started your band for fun, not thinking it would even go anywhere. Although at this point, people that hated Bring Me the Horizon largely weren't fans of the band in the first place. But still, many fans just wanted the deathcore brutality of Count Your Blessings to continue on subsequent records. And that sure as hell wasn't going to happen anytime soon, especially with the arrival of one Jordan Fish.
This is Sempiternal!
I mean, Linkin Park's still one of my favourite bands in the world, you know what I mean? Like, I still look up to them, I still think they're amazing.
So April 1st, 2013, Bring Me the Horizon released their 4th studio record, Sempiternal. And it shouldn't go unnoticed that April the 1st is April Fool's Day, traditionally a day for pranks and hoaxes, and the first record to feature Jordan Fish.
United will fail, divided will fall!
This record was a big step up in production, even compared to the previous 2. Terry Date would be behind the musical direction of this record. Terry Date is one of the most revered record producers within modern metal, and he definitely would not have come cheap. Date had previously worked with Pantera, Deftones, Limp Bizkit, and also Funeral for a Friend, the band Ollie jumped on stage with for his first spur of the moment live performance way back when he was just a teenager. The name for the record itself, Sempiternal, means eternal or unchanging or everlasting, and this was accompanied by the artwork featuring a flower of life. The basic meaning behind the flower of life is eternal creation and cosmic order. Sempiternal to me kind of means accepting something, maybe an affliction or an addiction or a problem. Sometimes we have these things that we can't change about ourselves, and sometimes you just have to accept it and live with that and not let it defeat you. That album could not have been made unless I came to that realization. It explores a lot of different things. There's topics of religion, there's social commentary on politics, there's talks about addiction, I guess forgiveness, how other people are affected by my actions. I just stepped out of myself for a bit and looked at the world in a different way. Ollie, at one point in his life, was a self-confessed drug addict. Substance addictions had been a battle for him for many years, and he's even been through rehab to try and deal with these issues. So Sempiternal wasn't just about developing the sound of the band. For Ollie, it was more personal. It was about saving himself and developing as a person. And this is actually one of the most common reasons that we see many artists in any genre of music start to diversify and explore their own musical development. However, there was a much bigger influence at play here. I must have been about 13 when I first heard Linkin Park, and to be honest, music had never played that much of a part in my life to that point. Then I saw a Linkin Park video on Kerrang TV, and it made me think, fucking hell, this is really cool. I felt like the music was speaking to me, the lyrics really resonated, and they were the band that really got me heavily into the scene. From there, I got into hardcore and metalcore, but I'd always check out their new albums.
It's like a paranoid broken over my back. It's like everything you say to me.
Linkin Park was a huge influence for Ollie, and that is ever apparent across the Sempiternal record. So again, this development in sound just seems like yet another natural progression for the band. This album brought them even more chart positions across the UK, USA, Japan, and several other European countries, as well as Australia. The first single released from Sempiternal was inspired in name by the Metal Gear Solid game series, and the start of Shadow Moses was inspired by the Metal Gear Solid theme music. And we now have Jordan Fish on board. Fish has been cited as one of the key reasons Bring Me the Horizon moved even further away from their deathcore roots, although by now they were already quite far removed from that genre anyway. It had been overwhelmingly positive. There are usually lots of ups and downs. It kind of pushed us out of our scene a bit more and into something new. I think we got a bit of a taste for it, to be honest. With Jordan coming into the band as well, we were able to develop so much during the time we were touring Sempiternal. It just naturally progressed, and we had just gotten better and better, so by the time that the label were asking for a fifth single, we felt like we could do something so much better than what's on Sempiternal. Despite Sempiternal being a huge success, some fans thought the band had sold out and gone all out pop or mainstream. And that sentiment continued with their fifth studio record, That's the Spirit, released in 2015. And this is where Jordan and Ollie took full control of the band's sound, as they even produced the record themselves. And another chart-smashing record at that. More top spots around the globe, including a number 2 spot on the US Billboard chart and UK album chart. Although that's the Spirit delivered an even more polished sound to their previous work, it's fair to say that given what was to come from Bring Me the Horizon next, they were only just getting started.
That fucking trophy says Bring Me the Horizon Best British Band.
Let's go and argue with it, because it says it.
Ammo and Post-Human are arguably two of the most diverse records any alternative band has released recently. Ammo, the 6th studio album from 2019, is officially labeled as alternative rock, electro, metalcore, and pop rock, whereas Post-Human Survival Horror is labeled as metalcore, experimental, drum and bass, deathcore, and industrial. There really aren't a lot of records that can fall under so many different diverse genres. The overall sound for Post-Human was also partly inspired by the video game Doom Eternal, a game that is part of the Doom series that dates all the way back to 1993. And Ollie even got in touch with the video game's musical composer, Mick Gordon, to work on Parasite Eve and the record overall. And again, this record landed on charts all around the globe. And there really aren't that many bands that can claim to have so many different genres accredited to them. Post-Human Survival Horror wasn't a studio album, it wasn't even classed as an EP, it ended up just being known as a commercial release. And for many fans, this was a sign that Bring Me the Horizon may be going back to their roots of extreme music. And it was a welcome return for many after Ammo. I think it's fair to say this album at the time caused the most division amongst many Bring Me the Horizon fans. Overall, it was essentially a very pop-focused record in terms of songwriting style and melodies. Not to mention tracks like Mother Tongue and In the Dark were straight-up pop-sounding singles. And then opposing that, on the same record, you had Wonderful Life featuring Danny Davey from the extreme metal band Cradle of Filth. Ammo is a love album that explores every aspect of that most powerful emotion. It deals with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as a result, we've created an album that's more experimental, more varied, weird, and wonderful than anything we've done before. Again, Ammo and Post-Human were both produced by Ollie and Jordan, and both of these records show a huge development in sound when compared to their earlier work. And whether you like the band or not, you really have to give them credit. This is a band that started out as a bunch of teenagers that could barely play their instruments. So to go from that to writing, recording, and producing their own records that land them top 10 Billboard chart positions and multiple chart positions globally is nothing short of astonishing. Okay folks, before we finish up here, I've set myself a target to try and beat this guy on Instagram, and I've got about 100-something thousand followers to go. So if you want to help me out, please do drop me a follow. There's a link in the description, and I would greatly appreciate it. This then brings us to our Nexus event, or just the 7th studio album from Bring Me the Horizon, Post-Human Next Gen, released May the 24th, 2024. Tragic. Literally, this is the worst Bring Me the Horizon album I've ever heard. Almost all of the new songs are either mid or bad. The songs don't complement each other. You could have done way better. This is not Bring Me the Horizon. This is one of many comments across Bring Me's social media platforms that all echo the same sentiment. Fans are once again not happy with the direction the band have taken their sound, or even just think the songs just simply aren't good. To an extent, I can see why some aren't happy. It's a very mixed album musically, and there's a lot of pop melody on the record compared to heavy stuff. Traditionally, albums will follow a very specific style of genre, and Bring Me the Horizon have once again tried to push their sound even further. However, on the 22nd of December 2023, Jordan Fish would officially part ways with Bring Me the Horizon after his decade-long tenure with the group, and many fans think this has ultimately ruined the band's sound, with most saying the singles released from this record are clearly Jordan's work, with the rest of the album lacking completely in quality. Over the course of 2 years, they released 6 singles from this album, starting in 2021. And now the infamous Kool-Aid, released in January of 2024. And if you didn't know, Kool-Aid is a reference to the Jonestown Massacre of 1978. I won't go into that here, it's a bit too gruesome, but there's plenty of information out there. Fans in general seem to go pretty crazy for all of these singles, so the hype for the album was clearly well established, and this might have been where Bring Me the Horizon messed up. Usually an artist will only release, say, 3 singles from an upcoming album as teasers to promote the new record. Releasing 6 songs from a record before it's released can be kind of a death sentence, especially if all 6 of those tracks are pretty amazing songs, which I do think they were. When an artist releases this many tracks from an album, it's hard to hold an objective view of the record overall when it's released, as you already have an idea in your head about what the full record might sound like based on these singles. So when the rest of the album doesn't sound like that, then of course it could be hugely disappointing. And I think that's what's happened here for many fans. Personally, I think overall it's a great record. There are a couple of songs that just don't really do it for me, but hey, that's bound to happen when you've been following a group for so many years and they've released so much music. Bring Me the Horizon have continued to try and push their sound into new and interesting directions, and let's remember where they came from. A bunch of teenagers that could barely play their instruments 20-something years ago, and this is where they are now. A global success, chart-topping albums, and a truly unique sound. So love them or hate them, they are one of the most diverse and successful alternative artists we've ever seen. And I, for one, am excited to see what they do next.